Thank you very much. We have a very big show coming up today, to borrow a line from a fellow who was on television when I was a kid. Well, that was a very, very long time ago. I'm sure you all well know. He didn't say it's show, though. He mentioned something about shoe. I've never quite figured that one out. Some of the things that we have coming up, we'll have a Russell Singleton, who's a physician assistant from Trip Family Medicine, joining us just after the 8:30 break. And he'll be here a little later in the program, of course, and take some of your telephone calls. We've got some folks coming by from an organization called, and I wrote this down, Safe Harbor, and they'll be popping into the studio in about 15 minutes, sharing a few thoughts with us about an event that they have going on, and giving you some details on all of that. So that's on the way, but I just wanted to open the show today because this is one of those days. Some days you walk in here and there's an obvious lead. Other days you come in and you say, well, there are several obvious leads, so I'm going to jump around a little bit here and what usually is somewhat of an opening monologue and share a couple of things with you. Benito had posted this story yesterday at our website, newsradio1310.com, which I'm sure a great many of you do look at now and then. You can see some news headlines there. I have a post you might want to check out from yesterday afternoon that I also put up there, and it deals with the history of Planned Parenthood and the pro-life movement. But I do it in taking a look at some of the past history of this, comparing it to John Brown and the abolitionists in the 1850s versus what we've seen in this country over the last 25 years or so, and the direction that all this happens to be going. So you might want to take a look at that a little bit later this morning, or right now if you have a chance. But Benito had this posted, and it's Jerome Council may open with a prayer. An ordinance was introduced Monday evening which would amend the city code to add a prayer to the order of business. No action was taken, but the council will be discussing the issue in future meetings. The city council has also approved the tentative budget for the coming year with a public hearing scheduled for August 18th. So that issue is going to be getting a little bit of attention. Now, there's no truth to the fact that Jerome was named after Jerome Howard. I just want to make that clear while we're sitting here. That would mean they'd have to have a Jewish prayer. Somebody out there might actually get that one, right? Possibly. Again, that predates Ed Sullivan, so maybe you won't. 809, Bill Colley with you on Top Story on News Radio 1310, KLIX, and newsradio1310.com. 63. I happened to live in a county a while back where we had the county council, and actually we had a local school board that were opening up with prayers. In fact, one of the school board members was a close friend of mine. His wife happened to be a pastor at a local church, and so they would often open up with a prayer and in Jesus' name. And the same thing would happen at the local county council. And these cases both ended up going to court, and they both had settlements. They were very resistant to the larger government efforts. That is the big footing that comes down from the federal government to get them to stop. But they were able to reach compromises. So they can now recite certain prayers, maybe a psalm beforehand. I have never been, well, maybe I wasn't in the past. I have never been among those people who believed that I hear it. I have a good friend. He was a deacon at my last church, and he was also a school principal. And he used to say at church on a regular basis, we need to get prayer back in schools. Now, prayer was eliminated from public schools way back in the early 1960s, and yet we still had religious training. If you were a kid when I was in school in the late 1960s, and maybe even going just briefly into the early 1970s, on Wednesday afternoons, there would be these people who'd come by. They were usually Bible school teachers at local churches. And what they would do is there'd be a Roman Catholic classroom designated, and all of the Roman Catholics would go across the hall to that classroom, and then all of the Protestants would go to another classroom, and we would literally have religious education in our schools on Wednesday afternoon, public schools, I should point out. And then that came to an end, too, because the lawyers got involved and said, well, hey, this is going to go the same direction as prayer in school, so you've got to stop. And the school made a compromise. At 2:30, if you had to go to religious education, school let out at 3:12. Not 3 o'clock, 3:12. I don't know why. We're talking, East Coast. That probably has something to do with that. Maybe we were 12 minutes behind everyone else. But we would get out of school at 2:30 if you had to go to religious education. And then you could walk alone across town as a little kid. And nobody worried about someone trying to abduct you back in that day and age. I mean, across town was 2 blocks. And everybody knew you as you walked down the street anyway, and everybody knew everybody else's business. So you were pretty safe in that particular environment. But I never believed when I would hear these people say the reason we've had such tough times in this country is because we remove prayer from schools. I don't know that really makes a lot of sense. I've got nothing against a prayer in school. I favor the idea. Courts would not probably support me. I support the notion that what you could do is you could come in and you could say, all right, we're going to have a couple of minutes of silence. When we used to go to school, there would be someone who would come on the speakers and do the morning announcements, and then we would do the Pledge of Allegiance. The pledge, by the way, pretty much stopped in some of our high school courses or classrooms. And then it was resumed when I was, in fact, they did it over the PA system when I was a senior in high school. So we would do it there. And my homeroom in high school senior year happened to be the cafeteria. And since there was a big flag there already, up where the teachers ate, we could actually do the Pledge of Allegiance. But if they could just say, you've got a couple of minutes, and if you're an atheist, just, clear your mind. And if you're a Christian, maybe you can pray if you choose to do so. If you're a Muslim, maybe you could pray for a couple of minutes. And if you're Jewish, you could pray for a couple of minutes. Or, if you're a Hindu, maybe there's something for a couple of minutes you can do too as well. Courts even won't allow that because they say that the atheist kid who would just stand there and think about his algebra homework would feel left out. And since his feelings would be hurt, then that would be wrong. So no one else can actually pray. But as I read this, and I think in Jerome, they'll be able to come up with some sort of compromise where they can do this, and they won't run afoul of the law. And I don't think it's a bad idea. As I say, though, I don't know that the lack of a prayer is going to impact how the town business moves along in future years. I don't think if they start a prayer that they're going to wake up the morning following that meeting and suddenly find that the downtown is all, power washed and the streets have turned to gold. It's not like that's going to happen. But I think it's not a bad idea because at least people in government, if they know that they're accountable, and they get to think about that, if they can think before their meeting that they're accountable to a higher power, then I think you'll get better government out of all of this. So I wanted to touch on that briefly this morning as we open the program, and then a couple of other things too, because a lot of us have been doing some prayers over the years. I have mentioned before that I have actually gone and attended the annual March for Life in Washington, D.C. The weather is usually terrible. Last time I went, mud was ankle deep out on the National Mall. To say the least, we made a mess of it, but we had 450,000 people tromping around out there. It had snowed a couple of days before, then things had gotten a little warmer, so there was fog all over the place. You couldn't see any monuments, and we were all walking around and just, through the mud that particular day. And then we got out on the street, we marched up Capitol Hill and then past the Supreme Court and had our rally, if you will. But there's a lot of, it has been said, and I mentioned it on this program not long ago, a pastor friend of mine told me many, many years ago, he said, we're not going to change this by law or courts, apparently, but we can change men's hearts. And you'd like to think that what's going on with these videos that are being released about Planned Parenthood, that we're making a huge, plus a little prayer and those videos combined, might be just the trick to finally bring this abhorrent practice to an end. Maybe not completely, but we'll start to bring it in that direction. And I got thinking about this in relation to the latest video. The 5th video is out, and it is absolutely disgusting. I can't put that in any other words. Daniel DeLayden, who was the fellow behind these videos, made an appearance on Sean Hannity's program on Fox last night. Couple of things. He's talking about the vote that took place the other day, and there will be another vote on defunding Planned Parenthood. He's talking about his hopes there. And then he's also talking about what they uncovered in this latest video.
I think it's an important first step, and I think that it shows us that we're only anywhere from 5 to 7 votes away. Whenever we're talking about fetal tissue harvesting, we're talking about cases where no feticide, no digoxin, no poison was used, and if at the same time you're trying to get those fetuses out as intact as possible, you're creating a perfect storm for there to be born alive infants.
And then they hack them to pieces. I think I may have called him Daniel. His first name is David DeLayden. I think I may have called him Daniel, just to correct that. But if these babies are being born alive, I don't know, this gets into a gray area, because if you've got people out there on the left who believe that it's still just a clump of cells until it's, 7, 8, 10 years old, perhaps they're going to argue and say, well, we should be able to chop those kids up. But once that baby is breathing outside the womb, it seems to me that even the most despicable leftist has a difficult time putting this argument together. You remember the fourth video was suppressed by a judge. Well, a court ruling here in Idaho may have an impact, and I think it's going to have a strong impact on getting that fourth video released and the rest of the videos released as well. The Daily Caller reporting on this. U.S. Chief Judge B. Lynn Windmill of the District of Idaho found that an Idaho state law unfairly targeted animal rights activists who might be critical of the agriculture industry. Now, you remember this story. They were making films of what was going on various farms, and they said the cattle were being abused. The state passed a law, and the state said this is a form of domestic terrorism. Well, the judge has stepped in and said no, 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 no. And he cites Upton Sinclair and many other people in the past who did undercover work in order to unveil various stories, and he said this is really a First Amendment issue in this particular case. Well, if it is, according to the Daily Caller, the ruling comes as a different federal judge tried to ban anti-abortion activists from releasing undercover videos of Planned Parenthood officials talking about harvesting the organs of aborted and unborn children. So Judge Windmill's decision here in Idaho really creates a precedent that will clear the way for the release of all of the rest of the Planned Parenthood videos, and we are told there may be just dozens and dozens and dozens of those before it's all over with. A couple of other things to share with you on this particular point. Coming up on 8:18, we'll have a break soon, and I've got to get moving along to our next segment of the program with some guests. 63, Bill Colley with you on Top Story on News Radio 1310 KLIX and newsradio1310.com. John McCormick, writing at the Weekly Standard, says he went and interviewed senators following the vote on Planned Parenthood the other night, including some Democrats. Democrat Gene Shaheen of New Hampshire said, "I have not seen them," referring to the videos. And then another senator, Brian Schatz of Hawaii, liberal Democrat, said, "I'm sorry, what's your name? Can you call my comms director?" Here's another one. Bob Casey, who's supposedly pro-life, a Democrat from Pennsylvania, says, "I have not seen them, no." So they've been voting on this, but they haven't seen the videos. Chuck Schumer of New York, all he said was to an aide, "Shut the door," when he was approached by the reporter. Only one Democrat, Senator Claire McCaskill of Missouri, told me that she had seen the videos. She agreed they were disturbing, but she added, quote, "That's not the point," unquote. Then she went on to say the point is to prevent abortions by making sure that women get birth control. I don't know. I thought that was part of Obamacare. All you had to do was walk into the pharmacy and they gave you, like a 5-gallon pail of these pills, and that was the end of it. Oh, and quickly this too as well. A Washington Post reporter did a story about the latest video, and most of these videos are not getting anywhere near the coverage of boy bands and the like on television newscasts. But according to the Washington Examiner, the Washington Post, the Examiner is a conservative newspaper. The Post is, of course, Marxist-Leninist. And the headline is, Washington Post reporter characterizes pro-life groups' sting videos as, quote, "attack," unquote, on Planned Parenthood. Really, they're chopping up little babies, but in order to expose that, you're attacking them. You know what? A lot of people in liberal media will burn in hell forever. I don't know, some of us may join them, but on the other hand, at least we get to mock them while it's going on. 20 minutes after 8 o'clock, Bill Colley with you.